what if I told you that the code for platforms like Facebook, X, and TikTok wasn't actually written in our century? That this constant pressure we feel to perform online, the invisible algorithms that sort us, the very idea of a social network was all dreamed up nearly 400 years ago. It's a wild idea, I know. So let's dig into the real origins of our digital world. So let me ask you a question. Where do you think the very first social media post was made? I mean, if you're picturing a Silicon Valley garage, maybe a college dorm room back in 2004, well, you're off by about 4 centuries and a few thousand miles. The real answer? It happened aboard a ship called the Arbella, as it was crossing the Atlantic Ocean way back in 1630. Yeah, it was right there on the high seas that the blueprint for our networked lives was first sketched out, long before a computer was ever even a spark of an idea. And this is basically the post itself. These words from a Puritan leader named John Winthrop weren't just some part of a Sunday sermon. Oh no, they were basically the original terms of service for a brand new society, a social network built on a pretty radical idea: constant mutual visibility. All right, here's how we're going to connect all these dots. First, we'll start with that 1630 post and the huge media upgrade that made it possible. Then, we're going to dive into what was basically the first social platform and its divine algorithm. And finally, we'll trace a direct line from their religious covenant straight to the code that's on your phone right now. So here's the core idea, the big takeaway, the fundamental rules of social media. You know, the way we have to participate, the way algorithms sort us, the constant nagging demand to perform. None of that was invented in Silicon Valley. It was all coded, conceptually at least, during the English Reformation. But to really get what the Puritans were building, we first have to understand the system they were trying to replace. You can think of this as basically the first major media system upgrade in the Western world. So before all this, the Catholic Church operated like a classic broadcast medium. It was one-to-many, totally centralized, and it spoke in a kind of closed code, Latin, that most people couldn't understand. The average person? They were basically in read-only mode. But the Anglican Church changed all that. It created a distributed network of local churches. It used a common language everyone knew, English. And, this is the crucial part, it required people to participate. That shift from a broadcast to a network was the absolute game changer. You can actually think of these major historical events as a series of software updates. In 1534, you get a new root authority. Then in 1549, the Book of Common Prayers standardizes all the rituals. It's like an API for worship. Then the English Bible translates the source code into the local language. And then in 1630, John Winthrop comes along and forks the code. He takes that existing Anglican model and tweaks it to create his own brand new platform. Okay, now this is where it gets really fascinating. The Puritan settlers, they took that Anglican network model and they just supercharged it, creating something that looks an awful lot like the very first decentralized social platform. At the heart of their whole system was this thing called the covenant. And the best way to think about it is as a binding terms of service, both social and religious, that every single member had to agree to. It completely got rid of a central moderator, like a king or a pope, and replaced them with a system where everyone was a moderator, constantly watching each other to make sure they were following the rules. So let's go back to Winthrop's first post. It really lays out 3 core principles for this new platform. First, you have the network. We must be knit together as one man. That defines the user base, everyone interconnected. Second, the logic of visibility. We shall be as a city upon a hill. This basically means your goodness is only real if it's performed publicly for everyone to see. And third, the engagement loop. Doing good deeds created a feedback system where God's favor, or grace, was handed out based on that visible participation. Does that sound familiar at all? This system created a world where your very existence, your whole identity, was tied to your constant visible participation in the network. To be part of the community was to be, in a sense, perpetually online, performing your virtue for everyone else to see, to like, and to judge. So, if there's no central moderator, if there's no king or pope, how did this platform work? You know, who decided who was a good user, whose content got boosted, and who was successful? In other words, who was running the algorithm? Well, their answer was providence. This was their divine algorithm. They truly believed in this invisible, totally impartial, data-driven sorting mechanism. It would rank people and events based on their moral signals, their actions. It was this unseen force that distributed success and failure, a lot like how a modern newsfeed algorithm distributes visibility based on engagement. And look, the platform had all the mechanics we'd recognize in a heartbeat today. You had user-generated content like personal diaries and public confessions. You had moderation, but it was handled by the users themselves through constant surveillance. Getting kicked off the platform, that was excommunication. And they even had a data layer, a permanent searchable archive of church and town records. The whole system was there. Okay, so now let's make it super clear. Let's trace the direct line from that 17th century theology right to the technology that's sitting in your pocket. I mean, the parallels are they're staggering. Their covenant is our terms of service. Providence is the algorithm. Divine grace? That's just engagement and likes. Their saints, the visibly virtuous, they were the original influencers. And excommunication was just their word for getting deplatformed or banned. The underlying architecture is exactly the same. And that brings us to this number, 395. That's how many years separate that Sermon on the Arbella from us right now. It's a pretty powerful way to realize that the social pressures we feel online aren't new at all. They have incredibly deep, centuries-old historical roots. So, why does any of this 400-year-old history actually matter to you? Well, it's because our platforms inherited this demand for constant, visible performance. It's why we're so trained to see attention and visibility as a kind of virtue. And it means that we are asked every day to just have faith in the fairness of these invisible, complex algorithms that sort and rank us, just like the Puritans had faith in providence. And all of this leaves us with one final, kind of provocative thought. If our digital platforms are really just secular, modern versions of these old religious covenants, built on the exact same principles of performance, visibility, and algorithmic judgment, then what exactly are we all putting our faith in today?